we're just calling to order at 6:35. We have a fairly light agenda today. The kind of two main topics of conversation. First of all, we're going to ask, since Judas is with us, now ask Judas and Denise to help lead us through a debrief of the Boyd Park Dog Park, particularly the unleashing or the opening event, but any kind of takeaways, I think, about the overall process as well. And then, since we didn't have a lot of other pressing matters, I thought it was probably a good time of the year to think ahead a little bit about our kind of annual engagement of the city and the mayor's office, and what we might want to do on that front this year in terms of communicating priorities and recommendations. But I think our first order of business is the minutes from the June meetings. So Nancy, it looks like you hadn't received any edits to those. Is that right?
I did receive one, Charles. There's a reference in the minutes to the Rector's Administration and their involvement in the New Brunswick community. And it was suggested that we delete that reference. And I thought that deleting the reference was appropriate.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. Any other questions or edits to the minutes before we put them to a vote? Okay, there being none, who would like to motion and second for a vote to approve the June minutes?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the June minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or nays? Okay, hearing none, then the minutes from June are passed. Are approved. So, so good. So let's jump right into it. Denise and Judith, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. I'm not sure how formal you wanted this conversation to be, but it did seem like it would be valuable, since in some ways, from kind of start to finish, the dog park was the one project we've been most hands-on with, seeing it through from idea to completion, and obviously making sure the event itself happened as well. So Judith and Denise.
Sure. I'll kick off, and then Denise, I will chime in and add too. But yeah, the event has come and gone, which is successful, and the dog park is up and running with activity. But in terms of the debrief on the actual event, I think you all are aware we had planned for a Saturday. Unfortunately, Saturday wasn't looking too great, and the city made the call to postpone it, which was the right call. And so it got moved from a Saturday to Sunday. So all the vendors, everyone, were very much in sync. Denise really handled that exceptionally well. So all the vendors were aware, and everyone could make it the next day, which was outstanding, given that it was a smaller event, but everyone that said they were going to come attended the following day. So that was great. We had music, organizations, community groups, food, as well as ice cream. Animal control were there, which was excellent. In terms of budget, we, really the only budget that was required from the city was the decor. So we kept it very cheap and cheerful. And we at first were advised to use a third-party planning company. And we chatted with them, and what we realized was they were much more probably looking for not what we needed. We needed something on a very small budget, and equally knowing the location and the wind and everything else. We didn't need all the bells and whistles as some party planning companies use. So what we did do is we went over to Brunswick Dollar, and we chatted with the store manager there, and they were so happy that we came over. The one thing that they weren't happy with us with is we came in too late. Otherwise, they would have totally helped us plan it and got much more dog decor type of decorations and such. But what they did have worked exceptionally well, and it really did add to the aesthetics of the event. But we ended up, I think, it was not a little over $100, like 100 and something dollars. So we really were cheap and cheerful, and I think the city was extremely happy about that. In terms of attendance, obviously we had the mayor, we had the mayor's team. I think most of his team attended the meeting, the event itself. We had numerous support from New Brunswick organizations, from the recycling to the PAC, to City Sounds, to the cultural, to the PAC walks, to 4-H agility, to Share Middlesex. So I think we had in total 9 or 10 organizations promoting and talking to the community about local organizations, which was great. So we had a phenomenal turnout from our local organizations, community-based, which was excellent. In terms of other attendance, Sal, of course, and his team, his direct team, as well as the guys that work on site, they were so good. They came and had a lot of trash receptacles. We had the ADA restroom. They were just really good, and they were constantly like cleaning up, and they did an excellent job, Sal and his team, and the guys that actually work on the ground. We also had some visitors from the new park rangers. So I don't know when in the event, probably halfway through the event, a caravan pulled up, and it was all of the current and or future park rangers. And, they got to see the dog park. I personally did not talk to them, but at least they knew of the dog park and so on. Also, of course, and I can't remember it, but New Brunswick Animal Control was there, and Leroy and his team they were so positive about the dog park, and understanding obviously the timing of its, the opening and the closure of it, and equally wanting to support the community as well as visitors having a place for dogs to be off leash. So I can't say enough about the local attendance from the communities and organizations and the mayor's team, as equally Sal and his team and animal control. So it was really great. In terms of some of the accomplishments of the day, it kicked off on time, which is great. We had excellent attendance, both from people as well as four-legged friends. I didn't get the actual head count, but at times when I looked inside of the dog park, it was not at a capacity where it was overwhelming, but people really managed themselves and brought in dogs and brought them out and went in as appropriate. And then just people without dogs too. So great attendance. And also a lot of people from non-New Brunswick coming in to check it out. So that was really great. We got media coverage too, a lot of media coverage from the various organizations that participated, as well as we had Tap Into. They were there and did, I think, a couple different articles on it. And then, of course, the city did pre-communications on it. In terms of lessons learned, planning and organization was obviously essential. And we all understand that doing any type of event. But I think the fact that, the city appointed Clary to be our point person and being able to successfully have multiple meetings with them from once the mayor said, yep, it's good, we're going to go ahead with this, and Denise and I getting in front of them with the plan, from inception to, obviously launch. I think that was very appreciated on behalf of the city. So I felt that they thought we had, a really good handle on this. And then where we needed support from the city, they filled in and gave us that support. So lessons learned is, I think, granted, it took a bunch of years to get this done, but once the actual dog park was approved and the event was approved, it was really that communication and organization. In terms of some of the feedback that I at least heard and or got at the actual event itself, I think everyone was extremely positive, very positive. They would just like to see a couple enhancements. And I heard fencing specifically. So some form of fencing along the highway there. So not necessarily, obviously, the dog park does its fencing naturally, but should a dog get loose and or whatever, a child even, now that hopefully the park is more populated, they would like to see some form of fencing along the highway. And actually, when I heard this feedback, Sal was right by me, so I pulled him over and we all chatted about it. And he said, definitely it can be done. It would look, and he gave an example. I think War Memorial fencing is what he gave as an example. I need to follow up to see where he is with that, but he said it's 100% doable. The other thing that I heard for suggestions was the communications were very good, I thought. However, I did hear post the event, people weren't aware of it. So, they were disappointed that this launch happened, but they live in New Brunswick and weren't aware. So maybe the communication plan, which I think was really well thought out, and we touched enough outlets to give, maybe it's like magnifying that a bit more next time. So those were some of the things that I did hear. In terms of opportunities specifically for growth, Denise, I think, got a direct request and or a question about rentals. Can I rent this dog park out for a party? So one of the things that we'd like to do is post this meeting, and Denise and I can follow up on this maybe next week or such, is, talking to the city about, there is a rental program already, right? So you can go and rent out one of the pavilions at Buccolo Park and or others. So the platform already exists today. So why can't we now do something specific for the dog park? And obviously it would be a revenue stream, and I don't know what happens with the money, but hopefully it's put back into the actual park that's being rented itself, so we can enhance, whether it be the exercise equipment, put additional benches in, or whatever happens to be, But I thought that was a phenomenal idea. And Sal seemed very positive about it. And so did Leroy, New Brunswick Animal Control. So I think now it's just putting it into motion and hopefully getting that up and running, and then doing some type of awareness communication on that. The other thing that I heard in terms of opportunity for growth was, like, can you do some type of dog training events where it's either within the dog park itself, where it's off leash, and or maybe with leash, but doing some things, on the side of the park. So I did hear that in terms of like community type dog related events. And the other one that I heard was, and this is Clara's daughter here, but we talked about dog yoga, and maybe we have yoga in the parks at the yard. And I know they're sponsored by, a private outfit, but maybe it's something we could look at with the city. Obviously, we're coming into fall, might be a nice time of year, but it might be something kind of cute and interesting. And the last thing that I heard was, what about a Halloween event? What's your next event going to be here? And at that point in time, we were really just interested in getting this event up and running and successful. So I'm wondering if maybe down, in a couple weeks' time, probably a couple, weeks, meaning 1 or 2 weeks, we start thinking about maybe a Halloween event where you can have, again, vendors and things like that, and promote the dog park via a dog related event. So that's a debrief I have. I don't know, Denise, if you want to add anything. And
I think you did a great job of summarizing our experiences and kind of our findings. I think, just to reiterate that the work that we did with the city, the people that were involved, it was just the right size event. It wasn't too big. It wasn't too small. The location where we had everything set up was really perfect. I guess the only other feedback that I got was that we need a bigger park and it needs to be in a different location. This was a great first step. Even though there is more space in that area, it's actually slopes down. And from a flooding standpoint, when we have storms, the big storms, it would really not be appropriate to have equipment down in kind of the valley part of the park. So that's very encouraging, other
Yeah.
open space, other opportunities to have something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
We did have some questions early on about the agility equipment that was installed, because it's not a big space. And we spoke to the 4-H representatives that were there, and they were wonderful. We had two great community groups. One was 4-H, the puppy raising club, and the other was NB Pack Walks, which is a volunteer group that gets together multiple times a month and does these walks, leash dogs walking. And they did a couple of activities. And people were, really encouraging about what we're doing for pets in town. So yeah, all in all, I think it was a great event, and we can use the model of how to work with the city, get someone, a point person on the city side, have committed people on our side. We engaged volunteers in and out of the Parks and Gardens Commission, which I think was another really, positive. We had some personal volunteers and some of the nonprofits that were involved. So yeah, I thought it was a great event.
and now we just need to, I think, so whenever we go by Boyd Park now, I'm always like, how many people are at the dog park? How many people are there? So I'm always monitoring it when I do. And it seems to, and even as I walk around downtown and we stop and pet some dogs, I ask them, oh, do you know about the dog park? And, I've heard, yes, yep, I know about the dog park. We were going to go, but we didn't go today. We're going to go tomorrow. So I'm hearing really a lot of positive things. I think, though, we can continue to create awareness of the dog park, working with the city and doing different, calm drops, as well as Pam Stefanik in terms of her massive distribution list that she has that reaches out to like 5,000 people plus X amount of rental units. So I think we should continue, highlighting that the park is there. I don't think we should, we did the event and people have used it, but I think we should continue the awareness messaging. And then also work on the events, potentially maybe a Halloween event, put that in front of, the city and see the appetite for that and get some good vendors and participation. And also look for the second dog park. Where is that going to be, to Denise's point? And I think that there could be some opportunities, and it's just picking up those opportunities to have this type of outlet for other areas within New Brunswick, not just the downtown area. So I definitely think there's a need and a want. So I would like to get together and talk about, where would those potential opportunity areas be? And highlight those, build up a full list, and then maybe put that in front of, obviously do a bit more of a proposal on the second one, as we did with the first one, and engage the mayor and his team on this. and get something up and running sooner versus later and not take the same amount of time that it did for this one now.
Thank you, Denise and Judith, for that. I had two thoughts on some of what you were suggesting in terms of kind of next steps and activating with events, and then the second dog park. So I'll start with the activating the space. And just one thing I'll say, in my experience, right, the city government proper, right, the mayor's office and the various organisms of the city government, typically, because the capacity and kind of their focus is elsewhere, typically do not engage heavily in kind of ongoing event planning and coordination, when it's not, like an opening is one thing because it's a city installation, city investment, right? But with the possible exception of they've tried a couple things like the food park festival, I think was mostly city driven, and a couple high things. But all that to say is not that the city couldn't be involved in any future events, but my thinking or suggestion would be that the best bet might be to try and identify, whether that's the Rutgers 4-H or the 4-H pup training club, which I wasn't aware of, or the New Brunswick Paws walks, right? Some of these existing, kind of dog focused groups, right, that were part of the of the opening and excited about it, right? I think it would be most natural in my mind to think what could they get excited about, helping to run with doing occasional or seasonal events like that. And if they do, the city could then help get the word out and any kind of logistics that would be necessary.
So Charles, let me ask you on that note, because you hit the two verticals, right? We potentially would like to do some form of ongoing training, whether, seasonal training potentially. And we'd also like to do maybe some events and maybe, now from a budget perspective, if there was a small budget needed, so would we act in the same way in terms of obviously putting together, the proposal, talking with these different outlets, and then from there, devising the plan? And if there is a cost and or a budget need at that point, do we put it in front of the city, or do you put it in front of the city in terms of the idea of doing a training program, working in conjunction with the 4-H puppy training, and also, putting forth an event, a seasonal event such as a Halloween event with New Brunswick Pack Walks? Do we need, because we would be driving the bus, right? The commission, and potentially Denise would volunteer again with me and or someone else. But do we need their stamp of approval before, or do we go after it's a bit more vetted?
Well, to your earlier point about, if the city, and this should be pretty straightforward, right? It's probably just a administrative matter, but asking the city to make sure that the dog park is added to the list of, rentable public,
Right.
park places. If a community entity wants to rent any park for a community use or event and submit the permit application and pay the fee and abide by the rules, the city's necessary involvement is limited to that, right? The city, the approving that and the council approving that, right?
Okay.
So you don't need the city involved in the same way that they were in the opening, right?
Okay. Mhm.
You could, right? I would think something like that. Personally, I would think I wouldn't necessarily think that's like a mayor's office type of thing. It might be like, does the recreation department have any appetite for,
Mhm.
you know, kind of teaming up on something like that? And do they have a little, you know, discretionary budget? In my experience, city departments don't have tons of discretionary budget for things like that, right? But, you know, they might, right? Maybe rec department has, yeah, like a kind of an event budget annually that they allocate in certain ways. But I would think that's why I kind of suggested focusing on, you know, is it the pack walks or 4-H,
Yeah.
and then, you know, maybe there's an opportunity with the rec department or something in particular.
Yeah. And also potentially, you know, and I don't know how, I don't know in terms of should we move forward and advance quickly on adding the dog park to the rental, right? Therefore it's some revenue coming in. And does anyone know, does that get reapplied back to the destination that's being rented out? Or is that not really clearly defined? But that's something, you know, I know probably people don't know in here, but, you know, if we were to create a small revenue stream, you know, could we use that revenue stream that we created to go back to you know, community engagement?
It is worth asking. My initial guess would be, in short, no. That I think probably the park rentals generate relatively little revenue, right? It's like $100 a pop, or depending, you know,
Yeah.
that is probably, the city just kind of sees it as kind of goes in the general fund, and it's covering, you know, the time of the departments that are approving, and, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think it's like then a specific, you know, allocation that gets you know, directed back towards that particular park.
Yeah, that's the kind of, and it's not big money to them, but that's all we need, right? That's the kind of money that we would need to do an event, $100, you know, at a cheap and cheerful type of level. So, yeah, I guess it opens up those conversations, but you know, obviously we're not thinking that this is going to be a massive revenue generator, but it's something maybe that can offset then future cost when we ask for $100 to do this or $100 to do that,
Mhm.
right? And here we're already generating this small little amount of money that really means a lot to us. But all right, I guess it's food for thought and to kind of put into the conversations as we move forward. But you know, okay, yeah,
Uh, I think, you know, our next item on the agenda is about, you know, planning and open space trust fund and
Mhm.
activities, whatever, or what our kind of our rhythm will be for the commission. And I think we're really starting to come together. We've been together for a while, this group of people, um, and there's been a lot of movement. So when the mayor was at the last meeting that the mayor was at, he did speak to us about, you know, giving him kind of a plan for what we see wanting to be done on an annual basis. And he made some suggestions about when would be good timing to do that. And then we did get his update last year about what his plans were for park management, park enhancement, park development. So perhaps as we're putting that plan together for what we want to adopt for ourselves, what we might want to talk to the city about, we could add some of these things, like, for instance, 2 dog park related or 2 pet related activities a year, you know, with a budget for community engagement and outreach and activities, and in 2 different seasons. Or, you know, we know that we've got the assessments that we've been doing, and are we going to cycle those that we do 2 or 3 parks every year, so that in 3 years we would get through all of them. I don't know if the numbers are right on that. We know we have the playground enhancements being done. I guess it's just for me, a way to try to structure and shape our discussions and our work. Not that we can't have other things come in, but that we are thoughtful about things that may come to our attention, like a grant opportunity. I sent out this past month information about pollinator seeds that were a pollinator seed grant that was available. It wasn't money, it was seeds. And the grant source was clear that it should be a project that was shovel ready, something that was in place. We don't necessarily have a mechanism for us to say, oh, we've got this project underway. This would be a perfect place to plug in this grant for local, native pollinator plants or something like that. So I guess I just think we can start to think a little more strategically and long range in a cycle. And that might help us get a commitment from the city early on without having a list of supplies that we'll need, just that there's going to be an annual Halloween parade with pet costumes.
Yeah. I like that idea, and depending upon where that goes within the commission, I'd be more than happy to create, and of course, working with you, Denise, should you want to, the dog park, specifically Boyd Park, and talking about that. And, Charles, again, obviously you're leading this, but should you want, I'm fine being the stakeholder regarding kind of composing that bit specifically for the dog park as well as a secondary dog park. So I think that sounds like a great idea, Denise. And I'm more than happy to volunteer to do the dog park portion of the want and need in the future.
Just before I forget, the other, since we talked about the second dog park, I don't know if anyone else recalls, but I know that in my conversations with Sal at multiple points, he has said that he has his eye on a section of Bucklew Park, sort of close to the senior center, right? But on the other side of the the street, the driving path from on the interior of the park, but kind of adjacent to the senior center side, there's this kind of an open field there. And Sal has told me at multiple points that he really has that in mind. He thinks that would be a good spot for a future dog park. I didn't get the impression that it's gone beyond,
No.
Sal just saying it out loud, but.
Yeah, 100%. I have heard that too directly from Sal. I think what I heard was timing wise, it wouldn't be for another year at least. And that was just due to everything else going on, and equally, learning from the Riverside Park too, and taking those learnings and then applying them to a future dog park. But I also think that he might have said that location where he initially thought was no longer in scope. It was somewhere else, and more so and I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but somehow it's in my head. But over where the guys have like the area that they have like their machinery and mulch and so on. So closer to, I suppose, the tennis courts. But in that back area of there, I thought that's what I heard. And there was a rationale. The reason why I'm saying there was a rationale as to why it couldn't be over in that initial location. But again, this has been a couple weeks now since the dog park. But yeah, I think that would be a great location. Yeah, I have no problem. I would, I'm happy to follow up with Sal on that, and at least get a status update for our next meeting.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay.
are there any, I mean, we kind of started drifting in the direction of the next discussion about kind of our next engagement at the city and the mayor's office. But before we leave the dog park, anyone else have anything they'd like to chime in with about the event itself, the whole process, what they've seen at the dog park itself yet?
Is anyone using it here that's actually on the call that has a with dog or without dog?
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
The park looks fantastic, and most of the reason it does look that way is because of Denise and Judith. But I was just wondering, are all the amenities that were slated for the dog park in place? Is there anything else that, they can put it together on a fast track? Are there tables or benches or anything that has to come in?
Yeah, so on the last document that we circulated, and I don't have it in front of me, but what's in the park today is phase 1.
Okay.
And then we have a phase 2. And the phase 2 is a couple things. The solar lighting was not up and running when the launch happened, so there will be solar lighting. Also, we are looking at some additional picnic tables and benches. One of the things that Sal was looking into is getting benches and picnic tables within the area, number, quantity to be decided. But what we were looking to do is like some form of dog theme. So whether it be a dog bone back, right? Something that kind of livens it up a little bit more. In addition, I know he was working on signage, so it would go potentially over the entry area and it would say Riverside Bark, so something a little bit more creative. The other thing, and this is a takeaway that I didn't mention earlier, but we need signage to know the small entrance, the small dog entrance versus the larger. And most people understand it, but we want additional signage there that says small dogs under X amount, large dogs, this one. So it'd be right when you actually open up the gate itself. So there's a couple other things too. So this was really phase 1. So I think the phase 2 is really about dialing up the aesthetics of the park and potentially putting in a couple more shade trees within the area of the park. Specifically, the small dog park has no shade trees right now, so it's pretty hot there. The large dog park had mature trees already, and I think Sal installed some. So there are several initiatives that need to be followed up on. But in terms of launch, that was phase 1. And I think you might have, if anyone has been to Boyd Park, there is wayfinding also that's been installed, and it has like a little doggy bone showing, pointing in that direction. So they were a little they were Tom Valeni was a little creative in terms of that, getting that. So we do want to elevate, I think, from an aesthetic perspective. I think we got the base, we got the core done. It's now elevating the awareness, community engagement, and having some creativity behind, some of the benches and things like that.
Josh just shared in the chat that his audio isn't working. He was on the city center website, the newbrunswick.com. They have a pet section, but the park is not on it. I just looked myself, and that's true. That should probably be an easy ask of Pam Stefanik to add. So the Boyd Park is on there, but just like Boyd Park generally, as well as Bucklew Park is just, and Monument Square Park is just kind of pet friendly spaces. But
okay, yeah, so we worked, we met with Pam several different times, and she was very enthusiastic and did a lot of support communications as well as guidance too, given that she does so many events here locally. We can reach out to her 100%. I'm surprised she didn't update it, because I thought she said, because she has a specific section there about dog friendly venues, restaurants, etc.
Yeah, that's
So
what
maybe she,
we're looking at.
yeah, I think she might have just forgot.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
I would.
all right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, all right. The one thing we were working with her on too is we were looking to, talk about cheap and cheerful and such, and recycling things that might exist in a city, such as planters. So Charles was involved in this, but there were some planters around New Brunswick, and I thought it was a different planter than what we were actually getting. But there's these large planters, and I don't know, they're about, I don't know, 2-3 feet high. And we wanted to put them in the park. And just have, some form of nice, easy shrubbery, something to, again, make it a bit more appealing. Unfortunately, the planters that we were going to use via Pam getting new planters, they were in horrible condition. So we can follow up with her. So if anyone like Charles and all these, if you have if you know of the city and or your organization getting rid of things that can help from an aesthetic perspective, make it a little bit more of it's very nice there, but if we can jazz it up a little bit, we don't want to be overwhelming, but make it even more beautify it. So unfortunately, those planters were not in a condition to be moved. I guess Sal and his team went out to try to get one, and it pretty much crumbled. And I guess the replacements for those planters, the red boxes, I guess, around the city. I don't know. But we're looking for things that, we can have a bit more than one, 5, 10, and just make it a little bit more something. But yeah, we can I'll talk to Denise, and we'll reach out to Pam on that. The other thing that I wanted to do too was we have the flyer that was already created about the dog park. Given now the city requirements is really, you can be from anywhere in the world as long as your dog has the tag verifying its vaccination and so on status. What I also wanted to do was give something for the hotels, the 2 specific hotels, the Hyatt and the Haldrich. So that way, and both I think are dog-friendly hotels, that way their clientele also know that there is a dog park within walking distance. So I wanted to create something, maybe using what the city did previously, but allow that to be almost like if they wanted upon check-in, or if they know a dog is in the check-in process, they can give them hey, we have a dog park here. So I wanted to do that also for the hotels and visitors.
Any other final thoughts on the dog park?
Yes, I would just like to say just a big thumbs up to Judith and Denise for all that you have done and making this so exciting. Makes me want to go out and get a dog, but I don't. And I think our next meeting should be at the Boyd Park.
That's a good idea.
The weather should be cool. Maybe August and September we can have meetings at a park. I think
That would be very cool.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that idea.
Very good. Okay. So moving on in the agenda then, I'll just say real quickly that there's not much new to report on the playground equipment installation. I did ask Dan, and he has just been waiting to get the Tom Valenti to review and give the green light, and Tom's been on vacation the last couple of weeks. So I believe he said he was hoping to catch him as he's back this week or next. But the the fact that Dan learned from HUD that they had more extended period of time than he thought to spend down these dollars, I think was a blessing and a curse, because made sure we have enough time to do it. But now it took the pressure off a little bit too. But I'm trying to keep it on his radar. And he said he'd be checking with Tom. I think my impression is the main. Well, I don't want to speculate too much about what Tom is looking at exactly. If it's just kind of formality, or if he needs to look more closely at the particular equipment we chose or whatnot. So that's kind of the status as of right now. I mean, we'd obviously had would have hoped that the equipment would be installed, in this summer season. Probably that's looking less and less likely, but maybe we can still hope for it in this calendar year, while there's still some park time to be spent outside.
Sure. Charles, I have a question on that. Do you, as in your chats with Dan and so on, I understand, majority of the parks and timing and so on, but I really think we need to put some weight under the summer is the time for the most needed park, which is the school, right? The what school is that again? I don't. I forget what is it? Yeah, McKenzie. I mean, now's the time to kind of. I get the other parks 100%. Not that I want to push them aside, but now's the time to, if we're going to at least get the money and the approval and the equipment, that one park, we have the rest of July and August. And I don't even know if that's doable, but I wish we could put a little bit more pressure to say, I get, there's all this going on and moving pieces and such, but this is the time to do the school park that's in dire need. Is there a way we can kind of emphasize that?
Well, I mean, I completely agree, and I made that point with Dan. That it'd be really great to have it ready before the school year started. I think it's not so much a question of. My impression is not that it would move faster if they focused on one particular park, right? They're going to kind of consider it and move it as a package regardless. Probably easier and more efficient just to do it all at once, because it's one source of funds, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, what if they? I guess there's a question about installation. If they're doing installation, and kind of consecutively, we could really push and say, do that one first, right? I don't know if they've even got that far ahead yet in the planning, but I mean, we could. Yeah, all I can say is that, I mean, I'm going to circle back with Dan next week to say, talk to Tom, right? And then we're also talking a minute about our next steps on engaging the city, depending on the timing, right? And if we're going to initiate kind of another round of with the mayor's office, sense to highlight that there as well, right? In case the mayor's office, is able to, because I don't even know how much the mayor's office has been involved up to this point, because it's kind of been generated from, Dan looking at that funding that he oversees with CDBG.
Gotcha. All right. It would just be a beautiful thing if those kids came back and they had this playground,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Speaking of this, just occurred to me, parks being ready, has anyone noticed if any of the splash pads are turned on yet? At Rec Park, Joyce Kilmer, I haven't seen it on at Joyce Kilmer.
Oh, good God, I would hope so.
Well,
It was
last,
It was on in Archibald today.
in Archibald, okay. I know that last year, I don't know about all the parks, but at Joyce Kilmer last year was a very long time before it got turned on. I think because there was a little maintenance they had to do, and it just was kind of down far on the queue, unfortunately. But
Oh,
I should, that reminds me, I'm glad that at least Archibald, at least we know one was on. Rec Park was the other one. Rec Park, Archibald, Joyce Kilmer. Those are the three, right? No others. I believe Rec Park at the end of last summer needed maintenance too. So that reminds me, I'm going to try and follow up on that. Or maybe I'll
Definitely.
just drive over to them and see if they're turning on.
yes. That's a shame if they're not.
Yeah. Okay, so as just kind of a final discussion point, we already started kind of circling around it, but just thinking about our annual engagement in our advisory capacity to the city and the mayor's office. I was looking back at kind of the timing of the correspondence we had last year. And I don't remember the particular rhyme or reason for, I think we just decided we were going to start reach out with that initial letter. But I know that, the city's budget, right, for the fiscal year, right, has been adopted. So that would presumably indicate that that the uses of the Open Space Trust Fund have been developed, right? And then the other thing I remember is that in our conversations with the city before, they have said that the kind of budgeting planning process starts happening as early as like the fall for, before it finally gets to the point of being finalized by the next spring. So I think it's probably an appropriate time soon to reach out, kind of re-engage, and maybe also include an invitation to one of the fall meetings to the mayor, right? And keep trying to make that kind of an annual habit. But I think the first thing we could start with is maybe asking, knowing that the budget's been approved, right? The uses of the Open Space Trust Fund, if those have already been planned out for this fiscal year that's just begun, and invite to a fall meeting. We could talk about maybe the most appropriate one, October or something, and then maybe, so anyway, I say that to say that I think if we ask first, kind of hear what the plans are for this year's Open Space Trust Fund, that could also then help us deliberate what priorities we want to highlight for them to consider, right, for moving forward after what's already in the works. But just any other, how's that strike folks, and any other thoughts about how we might want to engage them in the coming months? Denise, you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know that. I'm not 100% sure that we need to tie what we are recommending or planning to what's going on. I know that that the city needs to do a report on the Open Space Trust Fund as part of, I believe, the original legislation that got approved. There's an audit and, but I think the mayor's comments to us when we've met with him have been more about, let's decide what we need, make the recommendations, we'll figure out where it's coming from. So I almost see that as two separate things. Like if we want to come up with an annual plan, if we want to have priorities, maybe in categories, events, equipment, maintenance, I don't know, whatever the basic things would be. It might be more of a collaborative process than to go down through that. I haven't looked at the budget to see what's budgeted and then what got spent from the prior year. I believe Open Space Trust Fund and other funds like that can carry over. I believe that they're carryover eligible capital so that you can wait until you have a bigger project. But the city is putting a lot of attention to the parks. Every park you go to has something that we know that the equipment's going in. You're going to the new park. I can't even remember what the name of it. I guess it's on Livingston Avenue. There's, I think it's Livingston Avenue. There's maybe not. Maybe it's George's, but yeah. There's like really, and the dog park, and we just see so much effort going into the beautification. I'd almost want to separate out where the money is coming from what the priorities and attention. But that's just my thought. Yeah, I could go with it either way.
Yeah, you're right, Denise. I think, and we kind of have approached that way in the past, kind of folded into the broader conversation, right? So it might be as simple as, just kind of discussing, putting together, our kind of set of recommendations and priorities, and asking for feedback on what they have in the works that we don't already know about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess one of the opportunities that we have is if we're going to invite the mayor in October, maybe what we need to do is have some kind of a document, if not a formal presentation or formal, submission, something along the lines of what he gave to us a few years ago or last year about what his plan was, like an update on those categories, and then what we'd like to recommend or see. And rather than wait to hear back, he did say that if we wanted to influence the priorities for the next year, the fall would be the best time to do that. And so maybe, we could ask him to the October or November meeting and work in August, September, even if it has to be a subcommittee, offline, to come back to the full committee to say, here's what we're thinking based on, what we've done in the past and what we've been talking about for the last year.
I'm gonna call on folks. Aaron or Josh. We haven't heard as much from you today. Any thoughts about next steps in engaging the city?
Oops. You're both on mute in case you're talking.
I don't really know if I have any next step thoughts on how to engage the city. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Fair enough.
I'll chime in while Josh is maybe putting his thoughts together. Um, but I know when he last, I'm trying to think. So the last time were we in, I can't remember actually. But I know it worked really well, I think, in terms of Denise's thought of the direction of this meeting. And where are we today? What's being worked on from a Parks and Gardens perspective? And him coming, you know, and specifically us asking if there are key areas that we want to understand outside of maybe what's being done that we don't know and or being thought about. And then putting together, and Denise, you said this already, but putting together our wants and needs too. So I almost see it like what we did previously, you know, let the mayor come in and chat, understanding our specific areas of wanting to know what's going on, but then equally what we would like to do. So Denise already said that, but I'm in favor. I like the approach. I think that approach worked last time too. So I like what Denise had to say, and I'm in favor of that movement.
Thanks, Judith.
Hey, can you guys hear me? This is Josh.
Yes.
Hi. Mhm.
Sorry, I've been having audio issues here tonight. Yeah, I think as someone has not experienced or been part of the previous, I guess, collaboration meetings, and I don't know exactly what any standard has been up to this point. Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's at least, you know, the strength that I see of this group would be people who are experiencing the parks like on a day-to-day. Like I've just had, you know, passed by somebody who I was asking him, you know, about the skate park and if there's anything broken in the skate park, like, you know, just things like that, where I think there's an advantage of experiencing and being in the parks regularly and routinely. And I think for me, it's just a matter of wanting to know, you know, I can understand, I think, from if I was in city government, to know that, you know, sometimes having too many people telling you what needs to be done all the time can be annoying. But at the same time, from an efficiency perspective, you know, I'm more than happy to be kind of like we talked about the Reported app a couple of meetings ago. Like if that's an efficient way for things to get communicated to the city and they're interested and receptive in taking action on those things, then I think that a group like ours, which is diverse enough, you know, spread out enough throughout the city and having experiences in different areas, you know, it's an efficient way to convey and communicate priorities of things that could be improved, or where we see people utilizing parks in a really, you know, encouraging way versus things that seem to be going unused or you know, lacking for some other reason. So that's kind of where I see it as a potential for growth.
Is there, like, Charles, just thinking about this, maybe we can all kind of digest this. And I mean, I'm more than happy to move on, you know, the portion that I said, but I don't know if there's overarching,
Should be okay.
like, not overarching, if there are themes, right, that
It's
we'd
in the
like
back seat.
to, like, think about and understand what's going on within these themes. So dog parks, you know, I know Josh talked about at a previous meeting about, and he gave statistics in terms of the percentage of, you know, trees that we have, and you know, and where are we going with enhancing and obviously increasing the percentage of trees, you know, for quality of air, quality of life, all these things. So, you know, I don't know if there's different themes that we have that some of us are a bit more closer to and or passionate about. and maybe people can come back with, areas that they would like. We already have a lot from an assessment perspective on the parks. And I don't know, I don't know. I'm just thinking about this out loud as you're asking us questions and input. But I think we have a lot of people here that have different verticals where they are either passionate and or experienced or experts on. It's just, I don't, I think we need to move forward. It's just
Mhm.
how do we want to move forward, and then for people to go away and put some thoughts, ideas, words down so they can share, so we can then put together, not just that, but an agenda that we would like to see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And feedback, input from the mayor and team.
Yes, I think that's right. And I certainly didn't anticipate that we were going to figure it all out tonight. But that was definitely the idea, just to kind of get our juices flowing so we can think proactively about that. But I think what we could maybe plan to do is, as you said, Judith, now that we kind of planted the seed in our brains again, is maybe dedicate as much as we can of the August meeting to kind of revisiting again, right? What are the priorities we want to emphasize in kind of our recommendations and communications with the city and the mayor, this fall, right? And they don't all, they can be some of the same ones we've made before, right? If there's still work to be done, right? It can be more playgrounds, right? We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. But maybe we can come to, each think about that and come to August meeting, and maybe I'll try and think about how we can do a little more of a facilitated discussion around that, so we can kind of help focus our thoughts in on that. And then perhaps from there, already in August would be a good time to already be extending an invitation to October, right? Better to get it on the mayor's calendar early, so we can confirm his availability and work towards that date with that in mind, right? So that, perhaps in September we're, kind of finalizing our plan for our conversation with the mayor, both. And I think, as Denise said, our conversation with the mayor can be both, we could perhaps already have kind of sent ahead some of our recommendations, right? So it's not just dropping it on cold turkey, but also some of perhaps those areas for questions and conversation where it's not necessarily a recommendation, but we want to hear an update on, for example, I could imagine wanting to ask the mayor, we've had the park ranger program for, at that point it'll be 4 or 5 months or whatever. From his perspective, how's it's going, right? Whatever we've seen. So I think we kind of proceed that way. It sounds like everyone thinks that would be a good way to go. And just one thing I'll say to your point, Josh, but when it's more kind of immediate stuff, like we see, like, you just brought up, wait, are the splash pads working? That's the kind of thing that I think we shouldn't hesitate to be comfortable reaching out immediately, right? Whether that's report it, whether it's, I'm probably going to call either maybe Sal tomorrow, right, to see about the splash pads. But kind of that immediate troubleshooting and maintenance stuff is, that's just good for us to be vigilant about that at any point.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes sense. I appreciate that. Just to clarify, did you say the splash pad at Recreation Park is not running?
I don't know whether it's on right now. I just know that the last time I was there, at like the end of last summer season, it appeared to not really be working because the button, right, that on the ground that gets pushed was like so busted up that I think that, you know, I don't know how you turn it on, right?
Yeah, Recreation Park has been offline for over, I mean, it was all last summer, it wasn't working at all. And I think it was even before that it was, I mean, to me, that was, I thought, like a lost cause, honestly. Like
Yeah.
we talked to somebody and they were like, I think my wife mentioned it to one of the guys who used to be a maintenance worker over there. And he was like, oh, it's going to be a whole, I mean, it sounded like they were not even trying to fix it at that point. So I could be wrong, but it's definitely not running and hasn't been because we go over there all the time. So that's but I know there's I'd be happy to, I'm supportive of finding out more information for sure. Again, I'm just not sure I guess that's why I said the thing about the feedback, and not sure where feedback should go and how frequently. But yeah, I agree with you for sure.
Well, I think the splash pads, I mean, the splash pads, yeah, I think you're right about Recreation Park being busted up for a while. And and that sounds kind of vaguely familiar. Maybe I heard something like that whatever they had to do to fix it was more than just a quick replace something, right? But yeah, I really think we could emphasize, and this could be an immediate, right? Any of us just talking to Sal soon, as well as if this is still kind of a live issue when we're with the mayor, right? But the city invested in these splash pads, right? And they were great amenity and great benefit to the community. But if we're not, if the city's not also investing the time and resources when necessary to make sure that they can be used, then that's a shame, right? So, yeah,
100%.
I think that's something that we can try and keep both present and on the radar with the mayor.
And also, it's like one of the key objectives for us is, we all get maintenance checkups or whatever, at our own households for X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if the open space trust funds, can we make sure that, maybe it's a third party company. And I'm just saying my initial thoughts, but in whatever time period, the maintenance checkups need to happen so that the splash pads are up and running on X date, they are. And why are we waiting until X date to, I would love to put together a plan specifically for the existing splash pads. And it's 90 degrees out. I just feel horrible that, these kids don't have anything. Like, can we put together a plan, a proactive plan versus a reactive plan for these maintenance checkups that naturally need to happen on an annual basis? I would love to have more of a strategy versus a reactive and a prolonged reactive. I think that would be great to say, we cleared up whatever's going on, but what are we going to do next year? How can we can a third party come in versus, whomever's doing it now, who we know, but maybe they don't have the capacity. That's a great use of open space trust funds if it can be applied to that.
If I remember correctly, that was one of the things that the mayor was doing as we were coming out of COVID. The city was kind of reevaluating and looking at how things were getting done, where things had been diverted. And so I believe the mayor came to our October meeting. We got an updated letter in September about what the progress had been. The mayor I believe the prior year had invited us to send in priorities and what things we wanted to prioritize. So I think that's a really good suggestion, Judith. I mean, everybody is, and Josh, we're making similar suggestions. I feel like we have the opportunity to influence from a framework standpoint, like every year we should do, whether it's a contracted agency, whether it's a city agency, if we have a calendar that's basically similar to what we've done with the assessments, this should happen in the first quarter, this should happen in the second quarter. We don't supervise. I mean, it's clear that we are an advisory group, and we might have best practices that we want to propose or standards we'd like to see. But it is a recommending function. And I think just having a place to circle back can be very helpful in making sure that it's on somebody's radar, without us being in the position to direct or manage in an advisory capacity. That would be my feedback.
All right. Any other, is that Josh?
Charles, yeah, sorry, I was on mute there for a second. It strikes me that, and I acknowledge this might not be, it's coming from my own thoughts rather than maybe how this group is expected to operate or has done in the past, but let me know how much this makes sense. But it strikes me that there could be something really valuable about a regular sort of feedback. So like you mentioned about having the feedback on where we would reach out directly to someone. But I think I'm wondering if there's a way that there could be a written, whether it's the minutes from this meeting or something that's more maybe a consolidated list of just items that we can essentially send to the city to say, like, can you please, whoever's in charge or responsible for this, can we get an update on why this is in this current condition, or can't be, or is what are we waiting for on these basic things? And that could be something that's sort of routinely, whether it's we come up with it in these meetings and then send it, or we're asking, just to avoid the one-off exchanges that I know can be useful and can be valuable, but I'm just wondering if would that make sense to do, or would there be a place for some sort of consolidated list that then could be ongoingly updated to check things off and say, this has been dealt with, this has been addressed, this is, not our problem anymore, we're not dealing with it, that we can kind of have a log of those things going forward.
We haven't really done that quite in the past, but there's no reason why we couldn't consider it, right? I mean, we've typically, focused more on kind of, broad strokes, like, this park, needs some capital improvements. But I think like there's nothing preventing us from having a, kind of a mid-tier. I'm trying to think, because it's one thing if it's like, for example, the other, I was in War Memorial Park the other day and I saw a tree, looked like, had somehow a young tree had been like toppled over. So I just, clicked a picture and sent it on, report it, right? So that kind of thing, that's like one very specific maintenance item. But these kind of mid-tier things like the splash pads, I think, is a good example. It's like, clearly the city doesn't need a reported app. The city knows that one or two of the knows Recreation Park has not been functioning for a while, right? But if we're not, kind of keeping it on their radar, is anyone else, right? Are they getting resident calls about it? And they may not be, right? People might just kind of accept it. Oh, the Recreation Park splash pad doesn't work anymore, right? So I don't know what form that could take exactly, and I'm trying to think about who the most appropriate recipient of that would be, or recipients. But you know what I might do, that I'm thinking that maybe I might reach out to maybe Glady in the mayor's office and just run it by them and say, like, if we wanted, if we kind of wanted to do a periodic, like, checking in, and it could be maybe CC Sal or, whoever else is kind of relevant to the conversation, but kind of getting it on the kind of mayor's office radar may be helpful too, when it's that stuff that's, kind of in between, like, small immediate maintenance and broad strokes recommendations. What I like kind of that idea, though. I think there's value in that. Anyone else agree or have thoughts?
I think it's a
I
great
agree with-
idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think it needs to be an exploratory conversation to start. We getting a status report or checking in on something is a very different. It feels very different than this isn't done. This isn't done. Like, we know it's not done. So now it's, where does it fall in the cycle of the budget, of the planning, of the priorities? How many things can the department work on? Is this small enough that it can be contracted out? Like, that's not for us to decide, but to raise the items on the agenda could be very valuable. So I think that's a great approach, Charles.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's where, like, we do a lot and then we meet with the mayor, but I think if we could do something like post our meeting on a monthly basis, and whoever this champion is potentially, and find, I think, I really like the idea. I think it would be beyond helpful for us. I think it would be very proactive versus, Denise's point, like, well, this isn't done, however, I love the idea. I can't wait to hear your feedback, or, what comes about your email with Clary and whomever on the mayor's team on this concept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll try and do that soon. And if she says, sure, I can be the kind of point person, then I might just go ahead and send out an email and just so we're not waiting again another month. But if there's anything kind of outside of splash pads, which I think would be maybe one we've certainly identified already, but if there's any other
Playgrounds, we have the playgrounds.
Yes, and that might be another one too. Just like, hey, we've been talking with the planning department about this. Would welcome the mayor's office encouragement that this move along quickly, right? Something like that.
And I also think it's a opportunity to establish this concept of a champion within the mayor's team office, at that level, potentially. And it could actually be problem solving, right? As we're discussing and addressing, but equally it's about being, like, innovative and or proactive, such as the dog park. It's not about the creation of a second dog park. Maybe it's about the engagement and just making sure someone within his team is aware of, the positivity too, versus just the reactive and potentially, I don't know. I think it's a great line of communication and equally stakeholder management
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
on a consistent monthly basis, on a monthly basis,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Josh, I'm glad you put that out there.
Mhm.
And I think there's real value in that. So I think, I mean, there's nothing obviously stopping us from communicating with the mayor's office, but I'll just start by checking with Gladia, and my guess would be she'd be the most appropriate initial person. But I'll feel that out and then report back, and we could be prepared to kind of start with, you know, the two items of the playgrounds and the splash pads. Would be a really good place to start.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, we covered a lot of good ground, so I think we're in the last items of the agenda, which is, I just want to remind folks, I think you probably all got this email, but we did postpone the event at Joyce Kilmer Park that we had, you know, previously announced for June 25th because of the weather that day. So it's going to be this Saturday, 3:30. So you can come see Josh in his element as an arborist. Josh, you want to share any more about what you have in store?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little bit of, I'm a fairly flexible presenter when it comes to stuff like this. I kind of know that it could be a broad range of different age levels and interest levels and experience. So I always try to have a lot of different aspects to talk about. But yeah, it'd be basically me taking what I try to think about and do as an arborist, you know, managing trees and working on site, pruning and maintenance and tree biology, and then turning that into something that's, you know, digestible and interesting. And we'll probably go around the park and ID all the trees, and, you know, maybe talk about which ecological value benefits of trees and site specific locations, why you might choose to plant certain trees in certain places. I'll try to bring climbing gear and, you know, just kind of an assortment of anything that might be interesting. A lot of like small sample sections of like branches that are cut and sort of demo, sort of what show and tell, like different things that kids can get their hands on, or people can interact with, and yeah, just kind of get people interested in specifically that park and the trees there. Charles and I met a couple weeks back, and yeah, it's cool. It's a cool place to talk about what's going on, and then hopefully eventually lead to maybe some tree planting events in the fall. So we'll see.
Josh, I just want to say, I think it sounds like a fabulous event. I cannot make it, but I would 100% be there if I was in town. And I would love to hear about future events. I think it's something beyond needed. I think it's something we need to push the city on. I think it's something we need to involve the community, both adult and youth. So I really would love to see a plan. And really get, like, I love the fact that you guys are working together. I'm really bummed that I can't make it. So
Yeah, no, it's all
I
good. I
really do
understand.
hope you have more. I really
Yeah.
do.
One other, I just wanted to
sounds
mention this
fabulous.
something came through my email yesterday. There's a webinar on July 20th. If anybody's interested, I can send it along. It's through NJDEP, Urban and Community Forestry, and it's basically an info session about grants and about the grant process of getting money for tree inventories in municipalities and cities in the state. So I'm gonna, if anybody's interested, I'll forward it on, and then if any of you want to join in, I'm trying to. It's not a great day, but I hopefully will be able to call in. But that would be another, you know, entry point if anybody's interested in eventually that, you know, coming to fruition. So
I'm always interested in grants and money. You can send it along to me, please.
Yeah, please
Maybe,
do share, Josh.
Chuck, would you mind maybe talking about that a little bit more at next month's session? What that means, like,
sure, yeah, no
you know,
problem.
okay, cool.
And I just to clarify, so in terms of this Saturday's event, the primary kind of purpose or intention of that arborist talk is, I mean, Josh and I have talked about kind of the New Brunswick tree landscape, and is there some possibilities there more broadly, but that the kind of activity this weekend is more specifically in support of the our Joyce Kilmer Park mural project that I shared about last time, and kind of the creative theme around the Joyce Kilmer poet and the poem trees and all of that. So there also will be a bilingual recitation of the poem trees, Trace Coleman Park trees. The artist who's working on the mural will be there as well. So it'll be kind of creative and fun. And so the trees is kind of the learning hook, right, for folks. But for us as a commission, I think, maybe something to explore there about, whether that's something we want to pay more active attention to.
Charles, I don't know if Charlie Cradaville's still on the call as well, but if you have an updated flyer, I just thought of him in terms of distribution, if there's an additional push this week to send out stuff for the event. I know you had one drafted and sent out for the previous one, but if anybody's interested in, pushing that out this week, in advance of Saturday, that would be appreciated by any and all. So thank you.
Yes, I'm going to start sending out the reminders. I'll send one to this group, to the folks involved, and a little more broadly too, but absolutely, yeah.
And maybe we could ask Erin to follow up on making sure it gets into Hub City News for the upcoming week. It's only a day. It's the next day, but I think it comes out on Friday. But I just checked the latest issue and it wasn't there. I don't know if it was in the prior issue, but there's like a calendar of events. So we should try to be mindful, I guess, of the things that we're involved in and make sure that we get that information. I don't know I don't know if there's a formal communication to Hub City News. We're fortunate to have Erin with us, and I know she knows how to get that done. But Erin, if there's a different mechanism we should be following, that would be helpful. Just let us know.
Can you when will you send the reminder out, Charles, for the event?
Tomorrow morning. I know it was the original date was in the Hub City News, before we had to postpone it. I don't know exactly if that was you or someone else who made sure it got in there. But I'll include you on that tomorrow. And if you could make sure it gets to the
right people. I gotcha.
Thank you. Okay. Any communications and reports regarding commission or park stuff? Okay. I know that we are entering, event season, which is always great. We do have a Mercado Esperanza event coming up on July 30th, last Sunday of this month at Joyce Kilmer Park. I know the Hub City Sounds kicks off at the end of this month too, and then they have a bunch of events through, August and September. So good time for activating our parks. So take advantage of all that. Last but not least, I think I guess we bored Jared. It wasn't as exciting as he had hoped. He's no longer on the call. But any public comments? Charlie, I think you're the remaining member of the public. All right. Thank you all. Well, if there's nothing else, then I think we can move to close the meeting. We have a motion and a second to close.
I'll move to close.
Okay, thanks, Denise.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor of closing the meeting? Aye. Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone.